current geography and align on why you're here. I am Arshia. I am heading labs, outreach and recruitment at The Circle. I am joining in from Delhi, and I am here because I am so excited to learn from Mark and Alicia all about student agency and the way it connects to a sense of purpose. And I can see so many faces here who are also working towards a similar vision and can't wait to see how that germinates today. So let's get started with a little bit about the labs. You are in Circle Labs. Circle Labs are all about sparking ideas, dialogue, and change. Change in our collective idea of school in India. The Circle Labs host, like today, leaders who have done incredible, inspiring work in the field of education and envisions building a community of movements across India, not just through our talks, but also through challenges, awards, pilots, platforms, and eventually building an umbrella network of those who will reinvent India school by school. The Circle, just by the way, is also inviting applications for its flagship incubation program, the deadline for which is August 31st, next week. So go to our website, thecircleindia.org, to apply today. With that, let me welcome today's speakers. Sandeep Rai, founder of The Circle, in conversation with Mark Murphy, founder of Grip Tape, and Alessia Jani from Grip Tape, who is also a founder of the Student Boss Inc. They will challenge our notions today about what student agency really means, about blowing up the four walls of the school as an institution, and how deeply this agency is connected to a sense of purpose. Mark will do so by talking about his own journey as a school leader, Delaware Secretary of Education, and now building Grip Tape, a nonprofit designed by young people and aimed squarely at helping youth to be the true drivers of their learning. With that, I hand it over to Sandeep.
Thank you for that, Arshia. So for those of you that are here with us today, it's really good to have all of you here. Thank you all for making it. If you are able to turn on your videos for just a little while, you'll be able to go off in a little bit, but if you're able to, it'd be great to start off today by seeing some faces. Thank you for those of you who are. Really good to see all of you, and I'm seeing some familiar faces, folks I haven't seen in a while, and some folks that are new with us. So welcome, everyone. And Mark, welcome. It's good to have you here. Gratitude to you for being here. And I know that you're a bit under the weather this morning, and so even more gratitude for you being here through that. I'm excited to be talking to you, and I'm excited that you're going to be talking to this incredible group of people over the next hour. So we're eager to jump in. I know Elisa will be joining us in just a few minutes, but I'm wondering if maybe we can just go ahead and jump in, and then when she joins us, she will we'll integrate her into the conversation. Does that make sense?
That sounds great.
Yeah, great. So Mark, maybe, and first of all, for those of you here, if you're not with us in the group and you are watching this live stream, welcome to all of you as well. It's good to have all of you. Mark, I mean, I'm not gonna start off by trying to introduce you. I'm gonna try to basically begin this by saying, like, you have shaped so much of how we've been thinking about this work at the Circle over the past several months. Like, I think I have walked out of conversations with you over the past several months, pushed, challenged, like just inspired by the work that you have been doing. And I think I'm just excited for this group to be able to engage with us, to be able to engage in a bit of a wider conversation, to learn from some of what you've been up to be able to dig into that. But let's just start with like getting you to introduce yourself. And actually, as you do so, what I'd love to do is, like, you've had an incredible journey, and a journey that feels unlikely in so many different ways. And so tell us, like, how you got here. Tell us a little bit about what that journey has been like, and let's just start with that.
Sure. First of all, thank you for inviting me. Thrilled to be here. I've been totally impressed by the goals and the vision that you're setting, and what this circle can become, and what what this potentially leads to for all sorts of young people all over India in the coming years. So thrilled to be here. uh, when you ask how I got here, if we say here is grip tape, there was really one big thing. And it was watching, observing, and talking to young people led me here. And that really started about 10 to 15 years ago. You know, I was a teacher and a principal and a secretary of education in one of the states here. And I just over and over again saw so many young people in our schools and in classrooms just going through the motions. And so you think about, you walk into a classroom and the teaching, you might look at the teaching and the pedagogy and the curriculum and say, oh, this is pretty solid. But then you look at the 15-year-old or the 16-year-old and they're just kind of going through the motions. They're not excited. Their hearts aren't in it, right? Their brains aren't on fire. And I saw that honestly in hundreds and hundreds and then thousands of classrooms. And it just felt like this common denominator that by the time young people had reached these teenage years, their hearts were really not in the learning that was happening in schools. And I really started to wonder why that was and what was going on there. So I spent a few years basically interviewing young people and sitting down with them and trying to listen in a different way. This was a key thing, is that, when we sit down with kids, we often will ask like the perfunctory questions or the superficial questions. And so what I tried to do was get deeper. There's an approach called empathy interviewing, and I used a number of those types of approaches to really get into the hearts and minds of young people and how they felt about education. And two huge things came out of that. It was about 1,000 young people over 3 years. And two huge things came out. The first was that young people feel like ultimately school is a pretty disempowering place. That they're told what to learn, when to learn, how to learn, who to learn from. We give them grades, so they're told whether they learned it at all. And they don't have a leadership role in that. They don't have the independence in that. They don't use this word agency, but they don't have agency in that. The choices that they make in school are, maybe for this elective or that elective, but it is this place that they have to come to and they are told everything to do when they are there. And so for many of our young people, that feels really disempowering. At the same time, they believe in school. So when you sit down with a young person who talks about how disempowering this place is, that teenager will also at the same time talk about how important school is. And if the survey data across the United States bears that out, that young people know school is important. So you've got a situation where they know it's important, but it's really disempowering. That was one big thing. And the second big thing that came from those conversations was that teenagers have dreams, they have hopes, they have passions, they have interests, they've got curiosities. And so many times those things, those curiosities, those interests, they don't call it a sense of purpose, but maybe for some of them it is. Those things are not taught in school. There's not a class for that thing. And when they go home, they may not have a lot of resources. And so for young people who don't have many resources, it's not like they get to go to some like weekend program for this thing they're interested in or some summer camp. And so for so many kids, the message is you have to go to school now. We're going to tell you everything that happens there. You don't have the independence there. And by the way, those like passions and interests you got, like just hold on to those. You can do those later. And you can do them in college, you can do them in life, but you got to do this thing first. And to me, that was the root cause of what was going on around disengagement. In the States, it's about 2/3 of young people feel disengaged from school by high school here in the United States. And so that really felt like a root cause. And our shorthand at Grip Tape for that became young people feel like they're in the back seat of education and learning, and they want to be in the driver's seat, not just in the front seat. Like in some schools, some great schools might have students in the front seat as real partners. But what would it look like if students were in the driver's seat of learning? They had like full control, full agency in that thing. And that's what we started Grip Tape to try to figure out. And that's what brought me here.
I love that. I love those two realizations that eventually led to that. Tell us a little bit about what Grip Tape does.
Sure. So we do a few things. Maybe to highlight two of the big ones. The first is that we sponsor and support youth all over the United States. So we have directly sponsored and supported over 2,000 young people. We'll probably add another 1,000 in the next year. And by sponsor and support, that means that we ask a young person, what are you passionate about? What are you interested in? Why does that matter to you? What do you want to learn in that area? And then we accept them into Grip Tape, and we give them $500. We give them 10 weeks. We give them 100% decision-making authority about how they pursue that interest. And we give them a champion. And a champion is a person who supports them along the way without providing any guidance, direction, advice. So we have a very specific support model that I could dive deeper into. So that's one big thing we do. We directly help youth. We also help organizations and schools that want to adopt these practices to implement it for youth. But that's all about providing young people with an opportunity to drive their own learning. And a second big thing we do is we are constantly researching this. So when most people hear about this, wait a minute, Grip Tape, you give kids money and let them do whatever they want to do. Most people think that that's not a good idea. And so we do a huge amount of research and R&D to say, like, how are we learning about this? What are the ingredients here? What are the outcomes here? Does this matter? Does it matter a year later down the road for the young person? And we do that both in-house. We have what we call rapid learning cycles. A lot of this stuff is described on our website at griptape.org. If people are interested, we have in the resources section how we do these things. But we also, in the last year and a half, have partnered with Cornell University. And so there's a researcher at Cornell and a lab at Cornell, the Identity Processes Lab, Purpose and Identity Processes Lab, led by Anthony Burrow at Cornell, who is now researching Grip Tape. So we have a great partnership with a university that is also doing some research on this to understand what does this sort of experience lead to for young people.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think, hi, Alyssa, welcome.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well. Yeah, it's good to have you here. And thank you for being here as well, Lisa. I would actually love to hand this over to you for a minute. Mark just told us a little bit about how he's got here and his journey. Would love to bring you into the conversation. Tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got here as well.
Yeah, so my name is Alicia, but everyone calls me AJ on the team. I joined Grip Tape when I was a junior in high school in 2018. I did my learning challenge then, and I did it on learning how to market my cosmetics business, because at the time I was doing makeup as a side hustle and I wanted to get into the actual product industry. And so I used my grant to fund that marketing research. After doing my learning challenge, I actually became a YLB member, which is a youth leadership board member, which are the leaders and the youth that run Grip Tape. And so I joined that team. And then after being on that team, I became the podcast host for Grip Tape, launched the podcast. I became a champion to help out with challengers doing their challenge. I became a peer entrepreneur for our challenges in Colorado, and then the peer entrepreneur trainer. I've had every single youth-led position that Grip Tape offers. And as of recently, I graduated from college. I actually graduated a year early with my degree in marketing. Funny how that worked out. Did my challenge on marketing, and then I became a marketing major. And I'm now the Grip Tape Senior Fellow. So it is a new position. I'm the first one to ever have it. And I like to describe it as junior CEO. I shadow Mark. I'm learning how to start, grow, launch, lead an organization. Because eventually I want to do that myself. So this is a great learning opportunity for me. In my opinion, I think it's better than an MBA because I'm getting hands-on skills that I'm actually putting into action. So I am not only learning these things, but I have the authority, I have the agency to actually pursue these ideas that I have and all the things that I'm learning to put it into action to help fellow alumni like me and new challengers that are coming aboard. So I've had every single position, and now I'm on the staff team. So I'm learning Grip Tape from a new perspective, but bringing like a good history and just a knowledge base to the team.
Wow, how incredible. And so good to have you here, and couldn't agree more about the hands-on experience and the relative worth of that. So thank you for joining us today. We're going to be kind of going back and forth over the next couple of minutes with some questions to both of you, but excited to keep talking. Mark, I mean, this is evidence of like student agency, right? Like I just thought of so much coming out right now, and you've leaned pretty heavily into that, right? And I can say, as someone who's talked to you quite a few times now, like there are people on this call who have like shaped how I think about student agency. When I've talked to you, I'm like, wow, that's actually pushing and challenging me a lot. Tell us what you believe about student agency. Like, tell us how you've approached it. Like, break this down for us.
Yeah. So we lean into agency as much as I think you can lean into agency, and which is exciting. Sometimes a little lonely. I don't know if other people are leaning in this heavily, but we are completely committed to this. And I think there's a number of reasons why. The first is, this is what young people asked for. So like, I don't know how often we actually sit down with teenagers and ask like what do you need? What do you want? What would help you? And ask the right prompting questions that help get to those answers. You can't always just start with a completely blank whiteboard, but that's what they asked for. They asked to be in the driver's seat, to have an opportunity to independently pursue something, one of our first ever learning challengers. And learning challengers are what we call the youth who take this opportunity with us. So the 2,000 we've had. So AJ referred to herself as a challenger. One of our first ever challengers said, if we want kids to be able to do things in the real world, they have to do things in the real world. And it was like, it's like such an obvious statement. And it is something that I feel like we miss so much of in the education system. And so young people asked for this opportunity to do things in the real world, to have real ownership, to have the resources to do it. The decision-making authority and the financial resources were the two. And they designed this entire thing. Youth designed all of what we do. So that was the first. Youth asked for it. And the second is that if you look at the research base around this, I think it's very strong. And if you look at, like, for example, if you look at some of the research that says, like, what do young people need to transition into adulthood? Well, I think you can make an argument that there's three big things. They need competencies. Like, they can read, write, do math. They got to be able to have some competencies. They got skills. They got some stuff they can do, right? Number one. Number two, they have to have identity. Who am I in this world? What do I value? What am I all about? How do I fit in? And a sense of identity. A third is agency. Agency really boils down to, like, the simple definition: the skill and will to drive yourself forward in the world. Right? The skill and will to drive yourself forward in the world. I want to go in that direction with my life, and I got some skills to get me there. Right? Those skills could be like self-regulation, reflection, goal setting, forethought, like those kinds of skills, right? And I have a direction. I want to go in that direction. So you think about that. If you take agency, identity, who am I? This value set coupled with some competencies, that sets a young person up to transition into adulthood quite well. And so we believe in that base. And now, third is that we've seen, when young people have real highly agentic opportunities that are full of agency, highly agentic opportunities, they can thrive in those opportunities in ways they can't when the agency is stripped away. Right. So it's a very different experience and a different set of outcomes. Last but not least, when we started Grip Tape, we started from scratch. We started with 9 young people. The first ever learning challenge was 9 young people. Right. It was just a few of us, and we were trying to figure out what was going to work. And what we figured out from those 9, and then 25, and then 50, and then 100, and now up to 2,000, is that the ingredients to make this work are actually not very hard. You need to provide young people with an opportunity to pursue a thing with real decision-making authority, some financial resources, and a person to support them. And that's not a hard set of ingredients, and it doesn't cost a lot of money. And so number one, the ingredients are you can put them into the world. And second is the outcomes have been phenomenal. So we can talk more about the outcomes, but just to frame the early set of outcomes that we discovered is when a young person has this opportunity, number one, it changes their mindsets, right? They become a lot more confident. And they become more purposeful, or they have a better direction, as in, oh, I don't need to wait around until I'm 25 to do this thing that I'm interested in. I can do it now. I'm more confident, right? That's one. And two is, ooh, I got to explore this marketing thing, like AJ said. Well, I realized that I like this part of marketing and not this part. And maybe I want to focus over here or learn more over here. Like, you have a better direction because you get to explore this interest that you have. So that's one big change. A second is we see skills improve. So for us in the early days, we were measuring self-regulation, self-reflection, forethought, and goal setting. All four of those went up during the 10 weeks we were working with young people. And then we did a longitudinal study 12 and 24 months later, and those continued to rise after the programmatic impact. And so we could talk about why that is, but that was also exciting. And the third thing that changes for young people, the third outcome, is our behavioral changes. So this might be, this is usually the most exciting set of outcomes for educators, because the behavioral changes are that young people start seizing learning opportunities that they previously ignored. And so imagine you've got, like, we had the one of our first challengers, his name was Ethan, and the guidance counselor in the school had begged him to take like computer science, and he was like, nah, I don't think so. And then he did his learning challenge he invented this lighting system for these community theaters, and he got to code it and do some electrical engineering kind of stuff. And then he walked back into school in the fall and said, hey, I want to take that computer science class. Right? So they start seizing opportunities they previously ignored or wouldn't take, and they start creating opportunities. So they literally start inventing learning paths that they want to pursue. And in more than 50% of the cases, they bring in other young people. So it scales learning for themselves. They'll carry it forward without additional resources, and they will bring other young people into those learning opportunities.
Thanks for that, Mark. Alicia, you've experienced this, and it sounds like you've been really up close and personal this for a while as well, the past 4 years. Like, what's your take on this? Like, how do you think you've seen Grip Tape and also your work with students over the past few years?
Yeah, I think that the great thing about Grip Tape is that I didn't know how much it would change me, like, before it. Prior to Grip Tape, there's a lot of like words and terminology that I probably wouldn't have connected to it. But afterwards, like seeing these things in action, seeing agency, seeing youth-led driven opportunities, it really changed my perspective on a lot of things. So after doing my challenge, I learned the power of having real decision-making authority and what it looked like. And honestly, I was hooked. Like, I was doing a lot of entrepreneurial things prior to Grip Tape, but I was doing things on a small scale, essentially like playing safe, taking small bets, because I was only doing what I knew other people were doing. I didn't come from a family of entrepreneurs. I don't have those resources. So I was already going against the norm, essentially. But with Grip Tape, I got this, as Mark mentioned before, I got this higher level of confidence to not just play safe and to do things at a small level, like, but I wanted to figure out how much more impact I could make on myself, my family, my community, and essentially a global perspective. Like, what can I really do to initiate change for the problems that I see and the things that I'm doing? And Grip Tape really was like the seed that grew the flower for me. And it gave me the power that I didn't know that I was missing. And so besides student agency building confidence, it builds character. A lot of students don't get these type of opportunities until they're adults. And honestly, it's too late then. If you're waiting for adulthood to feel this sense of empowerment and push and confidence, then you're so behind, especially like as more youth are getting these things at early ages, and it's instilled in some at even younger ages. If you're waiting to adulthood, then you're behind and you're late. And there's a lot of goals that you will mark off of your list because you feel like I'm too old or it's too late. And if you start working on things now, then it pushes you to figure out what else you can do. And I feel like it moves you out of what can I do for myself, but what can I do for others? Because before you can really do things for others, you have to make sure that you are covered. And if you build these skills, then you'll start working on these things earlier so that you can do more and have more of an impact on the world. And essentially, agency just makes you dream bigger. Like, your goals get bigger because you feel empowered. And the bigger the goals that people have, even if they don't hit that high level of a goal, it's better that they go out swinging than not swing at all. And Grip Tape really does push a lot of those things. So Grip Tape changed me as a person. And I know that a lot of challengers that have done Grip Tape feel the same way.
Thank you. Confidence, skills, behavioral changes. And that was just so much evidence of that, what you just described. Folks, you keep going, and I do have a couple more questions before I fully open this up to the audience, but like, I do want to pause right now, like, and I just love to hear what's on everyone's minds. So for all of you joining us, like, come on over to the chat box. Like, what's top of mind for you as you're listening to this, and what are big questions that are top of mind for you? Let's take the next 2 minutes, hear from everybody here over in the chat box. Like, what's the big reaction? What are you thinking about? What's the question you're holding? I'm very, very curious to know, like, what's sitting with people now. Thanks for that, Anissa. Thanks for that, Shaheen. That's actually going to be a good segue into the next question. We're going to touch on some of this a little bit. Thanks, Kuldeep. This has been my quarterly nudge to Mark, come to India. Thank you, Anjan. Yeah, a lot about like, how do you play safe versus be able to play big? Yeah. Prerequisites. Yeah, thank you for that, Ram. About 30 seconds. If we haven't heard from you, come on over to the chat box. Very, very curious to know what's sitting with folks as you're listening to some of this. Yeah. Thanks, Kritika. A lot of inspiration, a lot of areas of resonance. We also have some questions like, how do you build relationships with failure? Like, is this through school? Is this after school? Like, you know, what are prerequisites? So we're seeing some stuff kind of surface up here. I'm going to build on this. I'm going to build off of Shaheen's point actually about this through school and after school. And then I'm going to open it up in just a few minutes, right? So I'm not going to ignore the questions in the chat box. I'm going to dig into one of them for a little bit, and then we'll veer this forward. Mark, we've been talking a lot about school at the circle, and it is an efficient delivery model that has made its way for a long time, right? It holds a very important role. And like, you know, everything I've been talking to you about is, you know, we have to stop thinking about what happens within the four walls of a school, right? Like, you talk a lot about like waking hours, right? We have these four beliefs at the circle, and one of them is that we need to be designing around waking hours, and that has been informed so much by like, you know, how you've shaped this over time. But we just love for you to like lean into that for us. Like, tell us what's informing that belief. If you get into this in school versus after school, like, well, tell us what you're thinking with all of that.
I think that the idea that school has the monopoly on learning is so unbelievably outdated. I think that we have this antiquated model and this orientation that that learning starts when young people walk through the schoolhouse doors and it ends when they walk out those doors. And that is flat out wrong. And I think it is deeply limiting to us as educators. I mean, I spent 2 decades in the formal education system, and I really don't believe that I understood this well enough at all until I really got outside of those school walls and outside the formal education system. I think that we as teachers and principals and superintendents are really focused on what is happening during our school days. That's where the kids are. They're in school. And so we're like trying to shove everything into schools. And we think that that's where all the magic happens. And I think it is absolutely wrong. This waking hours thing is one of my favorite points, that if you look at an entire year, if you look at 365 days in the United States, kids spend 80% of their waking hours outside of classrooms. And so you're only playing with 20% of waking hours when you focus all your efforts on school. And that's wrong on 2 really major levels. One is you're only focused on 20%. Like, well, why would you do that? Why would you limit yourself? And there's so much more potential. And second is, in the United States, at least in most cases, we are trying to jam way too much stuff into the schoolhouse so we're trying to like solve all problems, and we're trying to deliver all curricula and all ingredients and all programs through this like 6-hour school day kind of thing. And it's too much. And we will break the backs of teachers and educators everywhere by just jamming more and more in. And more importantly, for young people, it just leads to this like superficial experience of oh, I'm getting a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and there's no real depth in that. So I think that this is a huge issue, and I think the number one thing we could do, like how do you shift that mindset? Like, imagine if the way you oriented to the world was like, let's say you're an educator, you're a school principal or teacher, and you think, okay, what happens for that young person on Saturday at 2 p.m. matters as much as what happened on Tuesday at 11 a.m. That like Tuesday at 11 a.m., that kid was in school. Saturday at 2 p.m., that kid was not in school. But actually what happened at 2 p.m. on Saturday mattered just as much. We never ask. We don't care what kids do outside of school, really. I mean, we don't really care. We don't recognize it. We don't reward it. We don't credential it. We don't give them any currency for what happens outside of school. Imagine if we behaved differently and we started to care what happened at 7 o'clock at night or at 2 p.m. on Saturday. And that we made an assumption. Let's start from the assumption that what happened Saturday afternoon matters as much as what happened on Friday morning in school. And if we start there, then I think it will trigger us as educators to start being curious. Let's just start by being curious. What did happen on Saturday at 2 p.m.? What could happen? Then you start saying, wait, what community partners are available? What are parents doing? What can kids be doing on their own, which is the avenue we took. But there are lots of community partners. There are lots of people in and around the families and the kids themselves that can be driving learning and development and do not require the schoolhouse to do it. And in many cases, actually do it better because it's in a different environment, and that environment is more conducive to the type of learning that young person can glean from that environment versus what they can glean out of a classroom.
Thanks for that. I'm going to build off of this with one more. I'm going to open this up after this, for folks to be able to ask questions to either of these two. You've been talking a lot about the Cornell research, and you mentioned a little bit today, and you talked about some of the findings. Just bring us into the world of what you all are finding. What's it telling you? Yeah.
Great. So with Cornell, we said that we set this organization up with rapid learning cycles, and that's on the resources page of our website if people are interested in how we did that. But Cornell has followed the rapid learning cycles with us, which is amazing because it basically means we can do 3 research studies every year, and we're in year 2 of 3 years. So there's a lot. We're researching a lot. That's in lots of different studies. Number one. Number two is we have already gathered what might be the largest database in the world of positive psychological assets for youth. And it's because we did a study over the last year and a half, where we followed young people for 70 days in a row of their lives, and there was a daily diary study. So we've got pre and post, we've got daily, now we've got longitudinal. And so what I'm saying here is that we're doing lots of studies. There's a ton of data, and we're going to be analyzing a lot of this as the months play out ahead, in the next 6 to 12 months especially. But let me maybe name some early findings that we're seeing. So, like we measured dozens of constructs. Let me name some that are really popping at statistically significant levels, like where we seeing some really interesting growth. So, a few. One, environmental mastery. We're seeing grow significantly. Environmental mastery, think about this as like a feeling of being in control of one's responsibilities, and more importantly, able to select for optimization. So now I'm a teenager. I understand this environment. I feel in control of it, and I can select the directions to go that will help me best. Autonomy, which goes with that, perceived independence, but also the ability to act against social pressures and shape environments. We're seeing that increase. Self-acceptance. Who am I in the world? Am I okay with myself? Do I have the ability to be at peace with myself? We're also up at statistically significant levels. Those 3 areas I want to highlight are 3 of the 6 areas that make up psychological well-being, which is a broader set of constructs. And when young people have psychological well-being in those constructs, they're considered to be thriving. And so in the United States, we are really struggling with teenage mental health. And so these studies are happening in the context of teenage mental health declining in the United States. And we're seeing young people who have a grip tape experience, we're seeing many of the indicators of mental health actually going up, increasing more positively. A few other areas, we're seeing life satisfaction go up. How satisfied am I with how my life plays out? Decreases in negative affect, like feelings of negativity or sadness, we're seeing go down. We're also measuring purpose. So Tony Burrow, who is our lead researcher, is really an expert in purpose, which we could do a whole different session on. But we're seeing purpose go up, especially as it pertains to meaningfulness of the experience that young people are having. And maybe 1 or 2 more. We're seeing belonging. So we don't talk in education as much about belonging, but when young people feel like a part of something, I'm accepted here, like these are my people, like that opens them up for greater risk taking in their educational environment, and to be more open. And so we're seeing belonging be very high at Grip Tape. And last but not least, we're seeing this thing called pathways of hope, which really is about envisioning alternative directions through stress. So you think about it, like a young person is in a stressful environment and might feel like they've hit a plateau where they can't get through that. We're seeing that the Grip Tape helps them explore different pathways, and their ability then to envision different pathways through stress really goes up.
Wow. Great to hear all of that. And I mean, I'm curious to know like what happens over the next 6 to 12 months as you learn more through this as well. Alicia, before we open this up, like would love to just get your take on this as well. If I go back in particular to the piece around in school, after school, like anything you would add to this, like what's been your experience with this?
I think that it's stronger when it's outside of school. I feel like as students, like we have this preconceived notion of what school means and like what it looks like. And if we give this opportunity and it's in school, it doesn't feel like something that we're choosing to do ourselves. It's something that we're being forced to do or greatly persuaded to do, which is essentially the same thing. And so I feel like having that differentiation between this is out of school and you can do it if you want, this is a choice, it drives that sense of agency and you've choice. When you take that away, then it's no longer the thing that Grip Tape has created. It's something else. And that's fine, but there is so much beauty in doing it the Grip Tape way. Because it gives you that real confidence. It's like, I chose to do this. This is what I got out of it. These are the changes that I made. These are the changes that I saw. These are the things I learned because of a choice that I decided to make. So I feel like it's important to not blur those lines. I think that it's important that if schools could take those styles of learning and implement it into how they're doing it, that could be a great overall experience, because a lot of students go to school just because they have to, and it's not because they want to. And once you make learning more interesting and fun, a lot of lives are changed.
So very true. All right, folks. I am going to ask folks to come back over to the chat box just one more time. I just want to see what's on folks' mind. And then I'm turning this over to the audience. I'm just going to let folks ask questions, but I'm very curious to know, want to make sure we hear from a wide variety of people in the chat box. And then I'm just going to hand this over to some of you. I saw Kuldeep have a question earlier. There are a couple of pending ones. We've got one from the YouTube live stream. But before we engage with those, like, what's sitting with you one more time? Like, what is this making you think of? Mark's talked to us through a little bit of what they're finding, like with the outcomes with this. Like, we've talked about like what happens in school, what happens after school. Like, many folks here working with this at scale, trying to think about how do you make this happen. Like, very curious to know what's sitting with all of you as you hear all of this. We'll give it 60 seconds and then we'll just jump into some more. Thanks, Shaheen. Yeah, we're just curious to know how you spent that grant, Alicia. Strength and after school programs. Yeah, thanks for that, Soumya. A lot of requests to bring this to India. Yeah, totally. So very true, Anjan. Thank you. All right, let's keep going with some of this. Let's jump into some of the questions as more of the responses come in. There's a lot coming up in terms of questions. Kuldeep, I saw yours a while back. Wondering if we can start with that. Would you be willing just to come off of mute and give voice to that?
Yeah, sure, Sandeep. Thanks. Hi, Mark. Sorry, my camera, there's an issue. So thanks for sharing. So just a quick question, like you started off on like when you started, you had a very strong statement, like exposing young people to solving real problems at the core of it. But real problems have a lot of moving variables. So how do you build a relationship with failure? Because real problems and failures almost go hand in hand. That's one part. And a quick follow-up question to that is the grants, the component of money and finance. It's a very interesting one. How do you decide what is an appropriate grant? Because sometimes if the grant is too big, then the grant becomes the horse and the project becomes the cart. So how is the project the horse and the grant is the cart? Like, what is the decision-making matrix in that? I would love to learn around that. Thank you.
Sure. The grants at Grip Tape are up to $500. A young person can use anywhere from $0 to $500, and it's completely their decision. And they can request, they can start with $50 or $100 or whatever, and then they can ask for more later. And it's a 10-week window of time. We landed at 500 in a number of different ways. Number one, it is an amount of money in the United States that young people can receive, and it does not have tax implications for them. So there's like a logistical side of this. Giving money to teenagers is not like a very easy thing to do, and so 500 makes it easier. It's that ceiling that's less of a reason. We've also studied what do young people use the dollars for, and how much of the dollars they use. More than 90% of learning challengers are currently using above $470. They are using the whole 500. Now, this is an interesting innovation. We said we do 3 rapid learning cycles a year. We're constantly innovating on new things. This is one that we are interested in testing. Like, can you get the same outcomes for $250? We don't know the answer to that question. We also don't know the answer to the question of, if it was $1,000, what would that lead to? So right now we've landed at 500. We've been at 500 for 19 learning cycles. We've done this 19 times. We've got a lot of data around the positive outcomes. And young people, we survey young people pre and post. We do follow-ups. We do longitudinal studies, and young people will report the $500 to be a sufficient amount for them to achieve the goals that they were setting. But again, we would be interested in testing that. To your other question around failure. Yes, young people are going to struggle. They are going to fail. They're going to have a hard time, of course. And how often do they get the opportunity to do that in a low stakes environment where they're not being judged, they're not being graded? The outcomes matter for them only, right? So our champion model, we didn't go into this, and this is also on the resources page that has been linked in the chat many times. But the champion model is really important. And actually, I'll turn it to AJ to describe the champion model. She can describe what the champions do. I do want to put one clarification first. When in the beginning, young people do not come to us saying, this is the problem I want to solve, or this is how I want to make the world a better place or my community a better place. We don't start there. Most organizations do start there. But we start with, what are you interested in? What are you passionate about? And we are non-judgmental. We are agnostic to what that statement is. So whether it is, I want to help my community, or I want to learn how to crochet, both of those things are treated equally at Grip Tape, right? We are trying to validate the interests, the passions, the curiosities of young people, and therefore we are agnostic to what those are. And yet when young people are pursuing them and learning about them, obviously they are going to struggle and fail with that. And they will have their own conclusions with that. And the champion model, I think, is key. So AJ, can you describe the champion model?
Yeah, I always describe champions as therapists. So champions are not allowed to say, what you should do. They're not allowed to give you recommendation. They really just help you through a sense of guided reflection. Like, I'm coming to my champion and I'm like, I'm on this stage of my challenge and I'm struggling with this. They're not going to say, hey, maybe you should try this, or you should go research here. They're going to say, well, why do you think you're struggling with this? And what could you do to get out of this struggle? And they're going to keep you going through that sense of reflection. So it's all decisions made by you. There's no point where anyone is butting into my journey on what I should be doing and how I should be doing it, because the decisions are made by me. So I like to think of my champion as a therapist, someone that's just going to help me work out my own thoughts. And I want to also piggyback on the note about failure. I would say there's I don't know the numbers, but I would say probably like maybe 10% to 20% of challengers would say that they failed in some way on their challenge. They didn't meet the goals that they had set. But honestly, every single person that I've said that they have failed in some way had tremendous success following. I felt like I failed during my challenge, but I have accomplished so much afterwards that was because of that challenge and that sense of failure. There is a challenger named Kamani, and he's featured on maybe our website or our YouTube channel, and he wanted to make a short film during his challenge. He didn't meet that goal, but now he's like a high-level photographer based in New York that is doing all of these shoots and working with all of these amazing people and brands. And during his challenge, he said he failed, but now the success, like you can see it. So it's like that sense of failure, but being able to get back up from it is so important. So even if a student says that they failed, you may think like in that moment, okay, that wasn't so good, but afterwards the results and like the after effects will be more impactful than the challenge was during that time of failure.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Sugata Mitra's work was, I saw this in the chat, was an inspiration to us early on. It was like that granny cam thing or something. Anyways, yeah, that was back like 2014, 2015.
I want to build off of one of the points that you just mentioned and ask a quick follow-up, right? Like you talked about this, like just being non-judgmental with what kids choose, you know? And I think the first time you told me this, I really grappled with it. And I'm still grappling with it, right? Because I think there is a view out there that like you should shape kids' abilities to be able to create a better world. There's a view out there that like, you know, we're growing up in a society that's very, you know, individualistic focused. How do you make it more collective focused? Like, I'm curious to know, like, what's given you so much confidence in that approach?
Two things. One is, this is what youth asked for. This is the thing that is missing. They have interests, they have passions, they don't have the resources and the opportunities to pursue them. So if you're going to walk your talk around delivering highly agentic opportunities for young people, and you're going to walk it in a way that you actually value their opinions, this is what they asked for. So always starting there, number one. And number two, the outcomes play out really well. So whether or not a young person is pursuing crocheting or helping their community, we're getting the same outcomes. And then additionally, we've dug deeper on this. So it turns out that when you open up an application where young people can apply for anything, about 50% of them are applying for interdisciplinary things that are actually have this whole pro-social nature to them. Young people want to do things that matter in the world and help the world. And so already right out of the gate, you've got at least 50% of them choosing things that you might like, it might make you smile a little bit more than their own individual interest idea. And secondly, the individual interests often lead to all sorts of other things. So, you know, AJ was talking about doing her learning challenge on marketing her cosmetics business. And you might say, oh, I don't know if that's making the world a better place. But look what that leads to. It leads to a sense of confidence. And by the way, if you all start digging into AJ, you'll see she has this whole brand called Student Boss. And what she's doing is helping people to learn about entrepreneurship and helping them to launch. And so young people can take the skills that they build in their area of interest or passion, and they can bring that forth to the world. But nobody wants to bring their skills or passion to the world if they don't have some like confidence in what they're doing. So let's allow young people to build some confidence in that thing, build some skills in that thing. And let's not judge what they're interested in. I think we just lost Sandeep. I'm sorry. Let's see. I will jump in. We said that there was a question in here about what age group. We can answer that really quickly. It is 14 to 19 years old is who we currently work with. We do not have data and research on elementary age youth under 14. 14 and 19 is currently where we're at.
I think Sandeep's back.
Is he back?
Thanks for that. Yes. Sorry about that. Ram, you had a question that came up on prerequisites. Could you give voice to that?
Yeah, I could. Thank you for that. So I was just sharing that I'm wondering if it's a question of age, because I hear Mark using the word young people a lot, or is it a set of attributes that Mark is actually associating with? Where do you draw the line? I know your experiments may have panned out within an age group, but if you had to then boil it down to what are prerequisites for people to be a part of this program, does it actually stop with young people, or can it even go further younger than you probably designed it to be for now?
We do not know if this approach works with 10, 11, 12-year-olds, 9-year-olds. We don't know. So we could have a whole other conversation about trying to figure that out. We are working with some middle schools right now in the United States, like that'd be like 10, 11, 12-year-olds. We are trying to figure that out, but we're super early stages. We don't know. We know that the data is very strong, 15 to 19. We've added 14 in the last year and a half, and the data appears to be just as strong, but we do not know at other ages. In terms of prerequisites, I think this is really important. So at Grip Tape, currently, the only prerequisite is you have to show up with an identified interest. So we do not help young people to figure out what they want to do a learning challenge on. Oftentimes, other young people will help young people. 80% of kids that come to us from other kids. And so those kids are often helping the young people to identify those interests, those passions, but we don't do that as a program. So a prerequisite is you come in with an identified interest you want to pursue. Oftentimes people will say, oh yeah, well, this might only be for kids who are doing really well or well in school or whatever. And that's not at all true. So we've tested it with young people who have every GPA across the board, young people who have dropped out of high school, young people, like all sorts of different teenagers, and the outcomes are just as strong. The one thing I would say is that Grip Tape is not meant to replace school. So we can talk about the merging of those things, but it is currently a supplemental opportunity for young people that exists outside of school. If they want to bring it into school, they can, but interestingly, they don't. Like 98% don't bring it into school in any sort of way. So it's a supplemental opportunity. And given the fact that it's that supplemental opportunity, then we it's a low stakes environment. They can, but it's also a choice environment, as AJ had talked about. And so what I mean by that is if a young person has a life situation where like things are really falling apart, like maybe they've been removed from their home or evicted, or one of their parents has been incarcerated, then Grip Tape is an add-on. It's a supplement, and it's not going to reach a priority level for that young person who has major life challenges going on. And so we have that. If somebody were to really push and say, well, what really is a prerequisite? I think we would say, well, if the young person's life has tremendous challenges, this is not the right time for Grip Tape.
Let's open this up a little bit more broadly, folks. Any other questions that are out there? We're going to take, maybe one more, and then we're going to steer this to a close. Anything out there? Anybody that has a question on your mind? Let's just keep it open for Ditya. Go for it.
Yeah, hi, good evening. Mark, you incidentally just mentioned that this is supplemental to the school, What will it take schools to bring your vision into their curriculum so that your thought process, or the thought process of Grip Tape in terms of giving children that identity and that driver's seat, schools themselves immerse the same in their curriculum?
AJ, you're just leaving college and school. I have some thoughts on that, but I'm curious if you want to dive in there and say, what would it take for schools to bring this in?
I think that it's important for schools to stop seeing kids as just kids. Like, you take their power away, you take their confidence away, you take their abilities away. And I feel like giving them the space to think freely is very important in order to bring something like this in. Because again, if you introduce this while being in the school system, you could lose that sense of choice that is needed. But if schools are also bringing in that confidence within students and giving them those the space to think freely without a fear of constraints or lashback, then it makes this type of program easier to bring in. So I feel like it starts with those type of changes before this program can be connected fully to like a normal school system.
Yeah, thank you, AJ. build on that a little bit. I mean, I think there is a really strong research base. This was mentioned in the chat before around youth adult partnership. And maybe my version of that would be young people are in the front seat of the car and they're really partnering. I think that's an amazing research base. I think that is not what we're doing, but I'm connected with that work and think very highly of it. And so I think if schools made more strides towards youth being real partners in the schools, that would be a great step. How would we move even more so to a highly agentic set of opportunities? I think, to me, there's like two major policy type shifts that would need to occur. One is that we're blowing up this idea of the 4 school walls, and we're recognizing learning that is, in the United States, we're calling it anytime, anywhere learning. And so you have to care about that. You have to be curious about that. You have to dig into that what that young person is doing at 8 o'clock at night or on Saturday afternoon. And so anytime, anywhere learning, moving towards recognizing that. And I think that the complementary policy component that has to go with that is more of a competency-based model, right? It's not a seat time model of kids are sitting in this seat for 180 days a year, but it's a competency-based model. And what are the competencies we care about? And then, so if we move to a place of a competency model, and it could be, there's a set of competencies in math and writing, but there's also, hopefully we care about a whole other set of competencies that are going by lots of different words right now, but if we call them like life skills or 21st century skills, whatever people want to call them, there are those competencies that really matter for whether young people transition into adulthood well. Well, if we start to care about those competencies and we care about them through schools in a formalized way, then we have to ask, well, how would you measure those things? And so if you're going to ask how you measure those things, and then all of a sudden I think it naturally opens up to saying, well, then we should be measuring them not just while this kid is sitting here in this classroom, but we should be measuring them in real life components. And then that opens up to the anytime, anywhere. So if I were to say that a different way, I'd say, like, let's name what are the competencies we really care about as an education system, as a set of schools. And then let's ask how best we should measure those competencies. And then I think that naturally opens us up to a place of anytime, anywhere learning, which then gets you to a place of youth-driven learning and stuff happening outside of the 4 walls of the school.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Shaheen had a question over in the chat box. Maybe if you want to quickly respond to that, like working with kids from income levels of all levels, like tell us a little more about that, and then we'll bring this to a close.
Yeah. AJ, you want to take that one too?
Yeah. So Group Tape primarily aims to work with students of low income backgrounds. They typically have access to a lot fewer resources, and they probably would value this opportunity more than others. When you come from a household with a lot of resources and funds, like essentially your parents could fund a Grip Tape challenge. Like this is not something that you need. This can be seen to the wrong audience as a resume builder rather than an opportunity to explore something that you really want. So I think that is one of the best things about Grip Tape. Like you don't know that going in as a student applying. But looking back, I think that was so important because I was from a low income family, and it was something that really inspired me and motivated me, and that leads to like why I do the things that I do now with like my personal brand. But yes, to answer your question, we try to serve low income families specifically.
All right. To both of you, an enormous amount of gratitude. This has been an incredible hour together. I so appreciate you starting your Thursday morning off with us like this. I guess I just have one, like, my mind is leading with a lot of things, first of all. And I think this is, I've been talking about this with you for a little while now, but my mind is just buzzing. And I think probably is for a lot of people here today. And I think you planted many seeds that will continue for a while. Mark, like you've been advising us at the circle for a little while now. You're advising us more. Like when you think about that, and you think about some of the work we're getting into, like just what's giving you hope what's exciting you. Would love just to close with that, a little bit of what's giving you hope and what's exciting you. And then we'll turn it over to the audience one final time and close this out.
I think leadership is an activity, right? I believe that there's not people in this world who are leaders and people who aren't leaders. Leadership is an activity that anyone can practice. And so what gives me hope and excitement is the idea that what's happening as a part of this thing called the circle, or what's happening with educational leaders all around India is that they're willing to practice the activity of leadership in service of new ways of doing things, like start to strip away assumptions, start to really truly test boundaries, start to really innovate. I do not believe that the education system that we have broadly created across the world carries us forward for the next 100 years. I don't think that we're seeing the type of outcomes for young people who come from limited resources that we want to see. We're not seeing that in the United States. We're not seeing that anywhere. And so what gives me hope is that there are people practicing the activity of leadership, both with informal authority and formal authority, where they are willing to really try new and different things, and to be bold and to be willing to experiment and try and innovate. I think it's absolutely critical.
Thank you for that. Folks, we're going to turn over to the audience one more time. Gratitude, what's top of mind for you? I see some gratitude coming in. Maybe just come on over to the chat box for the next 2 minutes. Top of mind emotion, top of mind thoughts. What are you most leaving with? We're going to take the next 2 minutes just to be able to express a little bit of gratitude. And while we do so, while we hear from folks, Alicia, I want to ask the same question to you. I mean, you haven't been, this is our first conversation, but when you think about the work playing out, in the US, in India, across, what's most giving you hope?
I think that we have the ability to create the change we want to see. We have that power. It's not something that only a certain set of people can do. We have that power, whether we do it individually or in a sense of community. We have that power. So I'm most excited to execute on that ability to create change and to execute at a rapid pace, because you can try multiple things. I think that from the background I have, people get stuck in doing the things that have always been done instead of being more eager to push toward creating that change. And so I'm eager to create that change that I want to see.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. You both see all that's coming on over in the chat box here. I think there's an enormous amount of gratitude, enormous amount of resonance, enormous amount of inspiration. This is coming from a group of people, many of whom, I know, are fighting for change all across the country. So to all of you that came to join us, thank you for that. Mark and Alicia, just gratitude and respect for both of you. Thank you so much for this.